For more than 75 years, the world has lived under a global system largely shaped and led by the United States. Ever since World War II ended, America has stood at the center of global power, militarily, economically, and politically. For generations, the U.S. was not just another powerful country, it was the leader. The rulemaker, the country that shaped how the world worked. But today, something feels different. Across news headlines, global summits, and even social media debates, one question keeps coming back again and again. Is the world still led by the United States, or is it slowly moving away from American dominance? This is not a simple yes or no question. The answer lies in history, power shifts, rising nations, and changing global attitudes. To understand what is really happening today, we first need to understand how the US-led order began, why it lasted so long, and why it is now being questioned. After World War II, much of Europe and Asia lay in ruins. Cities were destroyed, economies collapsed, and millions of people were displaced. In contrast, the United States emerged from the war stronger than ever. Its factories were running, its economy was booming, and its military power was unmatched. At that moment, the world needed leadership, and the U.S. stepped in. America played a key role in creating global institutions meant to prevent another world war and stabilize the global economy. The United Nations was formed to promote peace and diplomacy. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were established to support financial stability and development. Trade systems were created to encourage cooperation instead of conflict. These institutions became the backbone of the post-war global order. At the same time, the US dollar became the world's main currency for trade and reserves. Oil was priced in dollars. International trade was conducted in dollars. Central banks around the world stored dollars as a symbol of financial security. This gave the United States extraordinary influence over the global economy, power that no other country had ever possessed before. Military strength further reinforced American leadership. Through alliances like NATO and security partnerships across Asia, the U.S. positioned itself as the global security provider. American military bases spread across the world, ensuring U.S. presence in key regions. For many allies, U.S. protection allowed them to focus on economic growth instead of defense. For decades, this system seemed to work. Global trade expanded rapidly. Technology spread across borders. Millions of people were lifted out of poverty. Major wars between powerful nations were avoided. American culture, education, and technology became global symbols of progress and modernity. But beneath this success, cracks slowly began to appear. Many countries, especially in the developing world, started to feel that the global system was unfair. They believed the rules were written by rich Western nations and enforced in ways that benefited them the most. Financial institutions were often seen as favoring wealthy countries, while poorer nations faced strict conditions and painful reforms. Military interventions also damaged America's global image. Wars in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya raised serious questions. While often justified as efforts to promote security or democracy, these conflicts left behind instability, civilian suffering, and long-term regional chaos. Over time, many countries began to question whether U.S. leadership truly followed the principles it claimed to defend. Then came the 2008 global financial crisis. The crisis began in the United States, but quickly spread across the world, destroying jobs, economies, and trust. For many countries, this moment shattered the belief that Western economic leadership was always safe and reliable. It exposed deep flaws in the global financial system, flaws that originated at the very center of U.S. power. At the same time, another major shift was taking place. China was rising. In just a few decades, China transformed itself from a poor, largely rural nation into the world's second-largest economy. It became the factory of the world and a major trading partner for countries across Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America. Unlike previous rising powers, China did not follow the Western political model. Instead, it combined state control with market-driven growth, and it worked. China's success challenged a long-held belief that Western-style democracy was the only path to prosperity. For many developing nations, China offered an alternative economic growth without political conditions. Through massive projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, China invested in roads, ports, railways, and digital infrastructure across dozens of countries. These projects expanded China's global influence and offered countries new options beyond Western institutions. China also expanded its military capabilities, especially its navy, and began asserting its interests more aggressively in the South China Sea and around Taiwan. These actions directly challenged U.S. dominance in the Asia-Pacific region. China does not openly seek to destroy the global system. Instead, it wants to reshape it, to reflect its power, priorities, and worldview. Russia, meanwhile, challenged the U.S.-led order in a different way. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia felt pushed aside by the West. NATO expansion toward its borders increased feelings of insecurity and resentment. Over time, Russia adopted a more confrontational approach, resisting Western influence and promoting a multipolar world where no single country dominates. Sanctions imposed by the U.S. and its allies weakened Russia economically, but they also encouraged Russia to seek alternatives. Trade in non-dollar currencies increased. New partnerships formed outside Western systems. In an ironic way, efforts to isolate Russia helped accelerate the fragmentation of the U.S.-led order. Beyond China and Russia, perhaps the most important shift is happening across the global South. Countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East now represent most of the world's population and a growing share of global economic growth. These nations are no longer content to simply follow Western leadership. Instead, they pursue their own interests. Many refuse to take sides in major power rivalries. They trade with both the U.S. and China. They cooperate with multiple partners. They choose flexibility over loyalty. This marks a return to a modern form of non-alignment, not driven by ideology, but by pragmatism. Groups like BRICS reflect this changing reality. While not formal alliances, they signal a desire to cooperate outside Western-dominated frameworks. Discussions about reducing dependence on the U.S. dollar and strengthening local currencies show growing interest in financial independence. So, what does all this mean? Is the United States losing power? The answer is more complex than it seems. The U.S. is still the world's strongest military power. It remains a leader in technology, innovation, and higher education. American companies, culture, and financial markets continue to shape the global economy. What is changing is not American power itself, but its position. The world is no longer unipolar. Power is no longer concentrated in a single country. Instead, it is spreading across multiple centers. China, India, the European Union, Russia, and regional powers. This is what analysts call a multipolar world. A multipolar world offers both opportunity and risk. Smaller countries gain more choices and bargaining power, but global cooperation becomes harder. Rivalries increase. Misunderstandings become more dangerous. The future global order will likely be more competitive, more fragmented, and less predictable than the past. In the end, the world is not rejecting the United States. It is simply becoming less dependent on it. The U.S.-led order is not collapsing overnight. It is evolving slowly, unevenly, and sometimes painfully into something new. The era of unquestioned American dominance is fading. A new chapter of shared power is being written, and how this transition unfolds may define global peace, conflict, and cooperation for the rest of this century.